Thank you. Thank you back there for that acknowledgement. Well, it is a great day, you know. We have been fretting all week long about this weather, right? About it's going to rain. I think Thursday night we're saying, okay, what we're going to do because the weather's going to be rainy, thunderstorms. I think there are going to be gusts of winds of 40 miles an hour. And so we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, but we decided not to worry about it. And that's just kind of how it is with this Texas weather sometimes. But we're going to kind of talk about that in a little bit. But we're here to celebrate one reason. And the thing that we're celebrating here is our identity is found in today. Today is Easter. We are an Easter people. Has anybody heard that before? You have? Okay. Now, one thing we may not understand is what that means as to be an Easter people. And maybe more specifically, what does it mean to you to be an Easter people? I don't know how you think or feel about that, but the good news is I'm going to tell you how I think and feel about it because that's kind of my job. So I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about what it means to me to be an Easter people. But we've got to start off a little bit by kind of understanding the story that kind of set us up for this day and for this moment. And so we're going to kind of talk a little bit about this guy named Jesus who walked and lived among his people, who brought life to people, especially to those who were lost, those who are on the fringe of society, those who have been ignored. They were the ones that Jesus came to. He didn't come to the popular people. He didn't come to those who have already been in part of the life of the church. He didn't come for them because they're the ones who are supposed to be going out like Jesus was going out to help the people who were lost. So Jesus came for the majority of the population around them who had been completely forgotten by God's people, who had been left for dead, who had been criticized and condemned and said they're no good and you're not welcome here in this place. Those are the ones that Jesus came to be among. And he walked among them and he gave them hope. He gave them a life that they never really thought could be theirs. He made them feel included, a part of God's plan, a part of God's mission in the world. And so he came to these people. And here's where the story kind of takes place. Because his own people, they don't like it. They don't like all the attention that those folks out there have. Because this is supposed to be about us, our club, our group, our church. We don't want to invite those other folks to be a part of our life. And so God's own people, Jesus' own people, set out to kill him. And so kind of where our story takes place is that when Jesus sets his face to go to Jerusalem for the Passover, he was warned, hey, don't go there by his own people. Do not go there. You are going to be killed if you go into that city. But what did he do instead? He went there. He entered the city anyway, in the very presence of his enemies. He went there anyway. And what did he do differently? Nothing. He lived among them. He walked among them. He taught what needed to be taught among the people, just as he had done for the past 3 years. And so later in that week, Monday, Thursday is what we call it, the Passover. It's when Jesus gathers his disciples among him. And the first act that he did in John's gospel is to what? He washed their feet like a servant. He washed their feet. And then he set them at the table and he converted this Seder meal into a meal of a new covenant. It's as if he was telling the people, I want you to listen to me. We're going to do something different now. We are going to have a covenant between you and me and you and God. And this covenant is to love one another just as I am showing you how to love. Now we're going to be bound together by this singular covenant. And so he shared this meal, he shared this covenant of love, knowing that his closest friends, his closest companions on this earth are going to turn their back on him. They're going to run for their lives. They're going to hide. They're going to betray. They're going to deny ever having any existence with him. Yet he did it anyway. And the story unfolds. His own government gave the church permission to have Jesus killed. And then his own community of faith, his church, his people, murdered him. And only a handful of people, of close friends and family, were there to take him off the cross and to bury him. Then on the third day, Jesus conquered death by rising from the grave. But I think the heart of the story takes place next. At least it does for me. Because after this whole situation takes place and everyone is cowering and afraid for their lives and full of fear, what did Jesus do next? He reappeared to his followers with a very intentional act to do what? Now, we're going to stop right here because this is where it kind of gets personal. And I want to put yourself into the story. I want you to think about what Jesus did and maybe what you would do if you were in that situation he was in. What would you have done if you had been betrayed by those that you love the most? What would you have done if you were undermined, everything that you had done? If you even felt that you were slighted or someone embarrassed you publicly, or maybe even as simple as you not getting your way, what would you have done at that point in your life? How would you have been treated or treated those who had turned their back on you? What would you do to those who have gotten the better part of you, to your enemies that you always tried to have you killed, all of a sudden were successful in doing what they always wanted to do? What would you do if you returned to their presence and you could do anything that you wanted to do? What would you have done in that moment? Would you return in their presence with the intentions of breathing life back into our relationship? Would you have been the first one to approach them and forgive them for what they have done? Would you be the one that would empower them to lift them up, to go and to heal and to forgive a world that is lost and confused, to love just as you love? Is that what you would do? Me either. Me either. So I guess what I want you to understand is the most significant to me about this whole story about Easter. And I want you to really understand and grasp this. This story explains to this first century group of people, and sometimes our mind is still back in the first century. It explains the kind of God that we worship, the kind of God that we are being asked to give our lives to. You have to understand that there's no other God or no other gods in the history of humanity that was a God of grace, that was a God of forgiveness. Their whole understanding of God is just one of these cause and effect gods. You know what I mean by that, don't you? When things go your way or the crops come up good, why? Oh, it's because God is blessing us with something, because we earn something that God likes. And so all we have to do is continue to do what we're doing, and God will continue to give us the things as we want. But as soon as mom gets sick, or as soon as the crops don't come in, or the fields are barren, we must be doing something wrong because God is harming us. We fall into this trap a lot of times in our lives, don't we? The weather is great. We were predicting rain. Why did the sun come out and the weather be perfect? It's because we are less sinners than the ones who are getting the rain right now today. Shouldn't we feel good about ourselves? Sometimes we fall into this trap that God has nothing better to do than just to jack with our lives like a video game. You didn't say your prayers very well. I'm going to cause your hair to fall out. I see you didn't do so good with that person across the street. I'll make sure your mama gets sick. We don't have that God. That's a Stone Age understanding of God. That God no longer exists and maybe never existed. But sometimes we do fall into that trap. Sometimes we do get caught up in that Stone Age understanding of God. And so this is where I want you to really focus in on the story today. Because I want to put it in perspective. Let's think of it this way. If humanity, that would be you, right? That would be me. That'd be all of us that existed on this planet. If humanity, all in a big basket, if we could do the most hideous crime imaginable to God, to make a fool out of God's Son in front of the world to observe in the most populated event in their history, and then take that Son and string him up on a cross for 6 hours and just watch his body give way through his joints and sit there and watch him bleed out as we mock and grab his stuff to keep as a souvenir. And the only response that God gives to us is what? To breathe life back into our relationship by forgiving us and then inviting us and empowering us to be a part of God's mission in the world to love and to forgive. Do you really understand the kind of God that we have? So for me, the whole point of our being here is because there's one statement we need to live and hang our hat on. And if we know nothing else about Easter, we need to remember one statement. And then live your life around that one statement. The one statement is this: love wins. It is honestly the best way for us to live out our lives every single day, not just in this parking lot, not just in that sanctuary, but in your homes, in your office, in your community, is the best way for you to live out your life because this love wins. Love is the best way to combat or confront this world. It is through love. Even when the temptation is so incredibly strong emotionally for us to try all the other things that we've ever tried. We've tried hatred. We've tried bigotry. We've tried prejudice. We've tried revenge. We tried resentment. We tried greed. We tried selfishness. We even tried violence. How has that worked out for us, people? But God shows us what love is. And because love wins, the lifestyle of choice for God and the children of God, that being us, is love. And folks, this has been the biggest criticism of Christianity and the church since the beginning of its time for 2,000 years. The criticism has always been, we do not live out the voice that we proclaim to love. We get territorial. We get angry. We think it's not fair if I don't get my way. We'll push people out in the name of God. I think Richard Rohr said it best. He said, Christianity is a lifestyle, people. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of being in the world that is simple, that is nonviolent, that is shared, and that is loving. However, we made Christianity into an established religion, and all that goes with that, while avoiding the lifestyle change itself. It's amazing. One could be warlike, greedy, racist, selfish, vain in most of Christian history, and still believe that Jesus is the one Lord's personal Lord and Savior. Are you kidding me? The world has no time for such silliness anymore, because the suffering on this earth is too great. We have to be a church that creates an atmosphere that teaches the lifestyle of love and acceptance for all people. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter your background. I don't care what gender or orientation or whatever you are. It doesn't matter. You are a child of God. And we need to create a place where this child can be developed, where all of us can come to seek to know Christ. And we need to build up expectations of ourselves. That if we say that we know who Christ is, we need to build our knowledge of this love. And we also need to live this love every day of our lives. We need to share the patient, the empowering, the unconditional, the all-inclusive and accepting love that only comes from a God who we have just experienced in this event that we call Easter. Resurrection is about new life, people. It's about new opportunities, because the old ways of doing life, it just doesn't work. And to experience Easter is to openly and honestly say, my story is filled with broken pieces. My story is filled with terrible choices. My story is filled with ugly truths. But it is also filled with major comebacks. It's filled with peace in my soul and a grace that has saved my life. This is Easter. And we want to be that safe place for you. The band is going to sing a beautiful song called Mighty to Save, and I want you to listen to these words. And it is a great sermon to hang your hat on.